This is A World on Purpose.
A purposeful life is the most important kind and the most valuable kind of life.
Every choice that we make makes a difference, for better or worse.
I loved walking in a village and seeing the before and after.
This is the podcast dedicated to those humans choosing to live larger by working for the greater good. And these are their stories. Stories of hope and of true change that come from living on purpose.
What if you were to suddenly say there are no challenges, there are only opportunities?
Regardless of where you come from, your financial identity should determine where you end up in life.
I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and my hope is that my inspiring guests will take you on an introspective journey that helps you tap into your own pivot to purpose, bringing greater meaning to your life. Welcome to A World on Purpose. It's not uncommon that a person's passion for purpose comes from adversity or a challenging incident that leaves an indelible mark on the heart and mind of that person. For Abbey Wimmemo, co-CEO and co-founder of EsusuRent.com, this certainly was the case. Here Abbey shares the courageous story of childhood struggles as a result of his mother's lack of financial identity, and how those memories led him to forming his disruptive financial company that is dismantling barriers to housing for working families.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A World on Purpose. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and I am thrilled, as always, to be bringing you amazing, amazing human beings that are doing incredible work in the social impact space, really living the ethos of living in a world on purpose. And today, I'm just excited beyond words and truly, truly honored to have my guest here with me, an amazing man I had the honor of meeting last October, Abbey Wimmeo, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of an incredible company called EsusuRents.org, right? Is that right? Yeah. Okay. And then we're gonna go into that in a minute. He's gonna explain to you what that is. But before I do, as I always like to start the show, my real intention is to bring inspiration, aspiration, information about these incredible human beings behind the work. And so I love to unfold what I call their origin story and their pivot to purpose. So we're going to do that with Abbey. Abbey, welcome to A World on Purpose, and thank you so much for your time today. I'm so happy to see your beautiful face.
Thanks for having me. It's such an incredible honor to be part of this podcast. Just excited to be here.
Terrific. Well, I know you're coming to me from New York City. We're going to touch a little bit on how Isusu and you are responding to the COVID crisis, but really this is, which is important, but we're going to really dive into you, who you are, what you've done in your life, all around purpose and impact, your background, and then talk about this amazing, amazing platform you've created. So could you start by just telling our guests and listeners what your incredible impact journey was, your origin story, where you came from, and kind of that aha moment when you realized in your heart that you wanted to be about profit for purpose and not just profit?
Thank you so much. My journey started at a very young age. I grew up in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria. I lost my father at the age of 2, and my mother raised me. One thing my mother always believed in was the fact that education was the most paramount investment in any child's life. Although she didn't have, a college degree, she only was a high school graduate. She invested her money, 60% of her salary and more, for me to go to the best high school in the land. I had the opportunity to go to school with ministers' kids, top businessmen, and that really helped level the playing field for me and answered one simple question. I am enough. I can do whatever anyone is doing if I put the hard work and persevere against all odds. Fast forward, when I was in high school, I had the opportunity to come to the United States. I got into the best university in Lagos, Nigeria, and I elected not to go. I self-studied for the SAT because we had different educational systems and came to the United States. I came from 78-degree weather on an average to negative 22 degrees in Minnesota. It was a rude awakening, but I had the opportunity to just work hard and, do the right things and persevere. My journey started at the University of Minnesota and, started working for President Obama's re-election campaign, and they founded a clean water business. I was really focused on a particular need where people around the world, at the time when we were running the business, over 800 million people didn't have access to clean water. We created a company that built water infrastructure in 6 countries and provided access to water for over 250,000 people. And after that, the inspiration behind that company was due to my personal experience, almost losing my life to typhoid, growing up in the slums of Lagos, Nigeria.
Gosh.
Fast forward, I had the opportunity to come to New York University, where to study development finance. And the ethos of my life has always been, how can I leverage my business acumen I've garnered at the University of Minnesota and make the world a better place? So I went on to New York University for graduate studies, where I focused on, getting big international development capital to make the world a more perfect place. So during that time, I worked in the private sector in places like Goldman Sachs, PricewaterhouseCoopers. But when we focus on the impact story, my co-founder and I, Simie, started Isusu. Isusu is a really simple company that focuses on leveraging data to impact people's life and drive good decision making. And you might ask, what kind of data? The biggest data we're currently focusing on is credit data. So in the United States, if you have a poor credit score, it can cost you over $250,000 in interest rates over your lifetime.
Wow.
My co-founder and I created this company that when you pay your rent, your credit scores, it contributes towards your credit score. So your credit score either go up or it's an additional byline. Because people that are paying their mortgage today get that credit. All we want to do is make sure when you pay your rent, that credit score goes up, and then you can avoid that large interest rates. I know that's a long story, but everything I have done in my life is always focused on my personal experience. Particularly Esusu was when my mother and I came to the United States, we didn't have a financial identity or credit score. We went to one of the biggest banks. We were turned away because we didn't have a financial identity. We went down the streets in Minneapolis, borrowed money at over 400% interest rates.
Oh my God.
And the simple premise for our company is really, regardless of where you come from, who you are, your financial identity or your zip code shouldn't determine where you end up in life. That's the fundamental ethos of what we've built and continue to build today.
Wow. Honestly, that's not a long story. I know there's probably more that we don't know that we really would love to know. But what I love so much about your story is, a lot of the times those of us who are moved by impact or moved by purpose, it is out of adversity, a lot of times. And out of adversity, I always talk about comes resilience. And with resilience comes purpose. They're all kind of intertwined together. And so the fact that you had that experience, I come from, as you know, also an impoverished background, and that's very impactful at a young age. And that can either be your downfall or your motivator. And it sounds like for you, it was your motivator. And so when you were going through all of these incredible pathways and understanding, especially that story about like you're not having a credit score and not having the ability to get money. I don't think that a lot of people realize that our underserved communities, that's very common, right, for people. And so you thinking about how to solve that, what was it besides just your experience? I mean, did you come through your financial background? Can you describe a little bit about your experience working in these giant financial sectors and what you learned through that helped you sort of shape how Isusu works?
Absolutely. I think that's a good question. One of the biggest inspiration for what we're doing, like I said earlier, it's due to the purpose and personal experiences. But there's a chasm in the know-how and how to execute against a particular vision you have. My experience really spawns from working in the big financial institutions like Goldman Sachs, PricewaterhouseCoopers, or the European Commission and other big firms. Because the rhetoric usually here is there's a way the private sector does things and there's a way the public sector does things. So there's this polarizing discourse to separate people and to divide and conquer. Our focus has always been, how can we leverage our head for business and our hearts for the world and bridge the divide to make the world a more perfect place? So practically, the experience is really twofold. Understanding and defining the particular problem, in this case, which is your financial identity, can determine where you end up and can cost you, if you have a poor financial identity, over $250,000 in your lifetime. And the question we asked ourselves is, if you have a house and you have a mortgage, it contributes towards your credit score and you're building it. But why do we have to marginalize renters who are predominantly low to medium income folks? Why don't we give them that same credit? Thankfully, there was a legislation in place to make it happen. But there's a big difference in talking about things, rhetoric, and things actually getting done. So what we did with that personal experience, working in the bank, in the financial sector, where I spent a lot of my time doing a bunch of deals, was to operationalize that process. And that's what we're able to do with Esusu. So tactically, what we did was we were able to combine 4,200 rules and regulation in the United States into algorithms, right, to be able to report your rental data. It sounds very easy to be able to take your rental data and report it, but it's incredibly complex and there are a whole bunch of barriers. But the experiences from these big private institutions help you focus on three things. Number one, the kind of people you need to make it happen. Number two, the processes you need to have in place that follows the letter and the spirit of the law. And then number three, the technology you need to move the frontiers of your ideas forward. So those are the three core pillars, coupled with the idea we had, and that experience helped us operationalize our vision.
Wow, that's just so impressive that you could take all of that knowledge and experience and almost improve upon an institution that's been around for however long, how many decades have these institutions been around, and it's not been a very kind institution to those that are disenfranchised, honestly. So it's wonderful that you did that. Can you tell our audience how Isusu works, like how somebody would go on and actually engage with your platform and what it looks like from beginning to end, how they start with a certain credit score and how it boosts it along the way, and just the ins and outs of how somebody would engage with your platform?
Great question. So today, if you want to engage with Isusu, we work predominantly with landlords. So we work with big landlords where we tell them, hey, your tenants, when we report their rental information into the credit bureau, it does three things for the tenants from a psychological standpoint, right? It drives on-time payments, because research shows that when tenants seek reporting rental data as a credit building activity, they are more likely to pay their rent on time. So this is just not only a good thing for the renters, it's also a good thing for the landlord. Number two, research shows, particularly from TransUnion, one of the biggest credit rating agency, that when you report rental data, particularly the landlord, tenants are more likely to choose a building with it or without it. So the first process is engage with the landlord. All the data is transformed into our system through their property management software, and then we report that data. And the last piece is you open your credit report the next month, and voila, the data is there. It's a simple process, and we make it sound simple. There's a lot of magic that happens on the back end, a lot of legal crunching, a lot of algorithms to make sure it happens. For an everyday person to engage, we have a place on our website whereby you fill out a simple form. It's going to take you less than 20 minutes. And if your landlord is not onboarded, we're going to call your landlord and convince them, letting them know that, hey, you want to get this done, and they should also onboard. It's a simple process to get it done.
Wow, that's fantastic. So the landlord is your focus, but an individual can also engage with your platform and shift you over to just having a discussion with their own landlord.
You got it.
Is that correct? Okay, so do you get any resistance from the landlord themselves? It sounds like it makes perfect sense for the tenant, but does the landlord kind of understand how this benefits them in the long run too?
The landlords appreciate what we do, because if you think about fundamentally, we're here to improve tenants' credit scores, which is great, and that's one of the core focus of our company. But if this also drives on-time payments, the landlords are excited, because if someone isn't paying, the landlord has to spend a lot of money on nudging tenants, asking folks to go knock on their doors or sending them incremental, emails, which is just additional work for the property managers. Number two, no one, and we've spoken to thousands of landlords, no one wants to evict their tenants. No, people are not inherently bad people, but they have to do it due to the economic circumstance in most cases. So landlords also think about the cost of eviction, which could range between $7,000 to $15,000 depending on the market you're in.
My gosh!
So we help them, right? Make sure once this data is reported, tenants are more motivated to pay on time. In addition to that, we don't stop there. Especially inspired by COVID, what we've done now is create a rental relief fund, a zero interest loan that if a tenant cannot make their rent obligations, we step in and offer that tenant a zero interest loan with an option to pay over 18 months. So they can pay as low as $10, right, bi-weekly to essentially tackle this debt. This is just not only a nice thing for the landlord or the tenant, it's good for the American economy, because if we make sure folks are not homeless, we prevent the issue in the first place by keeping them in their homes, then we're not solving homelessness backward. Then we're not letting people on the streets be there and then suffer things like abuse or other mental health issues associated with living on the street. So that's one of our core focus, and landlords are particularly excited about this because it saves them money. It also saves their property managers time.
I think that's great. We are going to go, I want to dive a little deeper into what you're doing with the COVID relief fund around that, and how, just get your opinion. We're going to go do that in the third part of our series here. This is a 3-part episode, and I want to understand more about your opinions about how this COVID crisis is affecting tenants and landlord relationships and just the fallout that has happened. So I'm excited to dive into that a little deeper, and we'll also let people know at the end where they can go to support that fund. But we are going to wrap this first part of part one of series part one of series 3 for Abbey Wimmeo and Isusu. And I'm so thrilled. Next part, we're going to go dive into how you funded this project, what that process was like, some really exciting news that you had come up this year, which I can't wait to announce to everyone. And just so thrilled to be able to just get to know you better and give everyone your story. So before we wrap this episode, why don't you tell everyone where they can find you, and then we'll come back in part 2.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot. You can find us at esusurent.com. So that's ESUSURENT.com. And find us. We're easy to find. We're also on all social media platforms. And we go by Esusu Financial. So looking forward to engaging and trying to pave that permanent bridge to financial access and inclusion for everyone.
That's terrific. And so everyone, thank you for tuning in to my episode with Abbey Wimmeo and about Isusu. This is part 1. Come back for part 2 and 3 because it's going to get really interesting and very exciting. You can also find all of his information on our website, aworldonpurpose.org, and we'll talk about all that later. So thank you very much for tuning in, and come back for part 2. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to A World on Purpose. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, and I'm so excited to dive into part 2 of 3 with my amazing guest, Abbey Wimmeo of Isusurents.org, co-founder and co-CEO. In the last episode, he kind of gave us his incredible, heartfelt origin story, which I really believe is where a lot of social impact and purpose comes from. And so be sure to go back and listen to that because it was very special and very touching. And additionally, he described his new amazing company called Isusurents.org. We're thrilled to have Abbey back with us. So we're going to kind of get more into the weeds here around the company, some exciting information and all the kinds of ways, the challenges and the opportunities that came in terms of getting this amazing vision to fruition. So Abbey, thank you so much for coming back. It's nice to have you back with us.
Be back. Wonderful to be back, and looking forward to sharing more.
Yeah. So isusurents.org. First of all, I have a question. Where does the name Isusu come from?
It's a great question. Isusu is a West African, it's inspired by a West African saying, particularly in Nigeria from the Yoruba land. And it's really summed up on a simple premise. If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far, we fundamentally go together because our futures are inextricably tied together. It's a lot of words encapsulated in a succinct word, but that's what the Yoruba culture is all about. It's all about simplicity, and the power of Esusu is what we believe can make the world a more perfect place.
That is so beautiful. I had a feeling that it had something very meaningful, and so I really wanted everyone to hear that. So thank you for sharing. It's a beautiful name, and it's so fitting for what you're doing. So you talked a little bit about Isusu and how it helps people build credit and really provides a tool for the underserved community to, reach their financial dreams. I want to talk about your financial dreams and how this whole process got started. I know that you were able to get some significant financial backing as an entrepreneur, which we know is always a really difficult task, especially if it's a social enterprise or has some kind of nonprofit attached to it. I'd love for you to talk a little bit about what that process was like for you, the challenges, the highs, the lows, so that people who are looking to sort of pursue their dream and think maybe they can't make it happen, they definitely can. And you're proof of that. Could you talk a little bit about what that was like for you?
The first thing I would say is raising capital, particularly if you want to, work on something impactful. It is hard because you're having to struggle between having an impact and making money. So you have a double mission, and then a traditional business, just the main mandate is to make money. Mm-hmm. So the journey to raising capital for this company was incredibly difficult. I was fortunate to have a co-founder in Samir, that's a brother, a work husband, and everything. We've gone through a lot together. But just to give you a little bit of a story.
Please.
Started Isusu while both of us were working. I was working at PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was working on big mergers and acquisition, essentially what happens when you buy, sell, or separate companies, what happened before, during, and after. And Samir was also leading a huge sales organization while he was at LinkedIn. We worked on this as a side idea at night and continued to just, have a go at it. A lot of failures along the way. But 2 years after working on it, we had a good traction where we were invited to the New York Stock Exchange to talk about what we were building. So we presented there and talked about it, and we were everywhere. So our little baby we were pregnant with had come out to the world, and there was no way to hide anymore. So we had to tell our partners in our respective firms that this is what we want to focus on for the rest of our lives. So we quit our jobs in late 2017 and focused on Isusu full-time 2018. The journey was incredibly hard. We took out all our life savings, got in a lot of debt, including credit card debt, just to make sure we can realize our dream, to make sure no one is left behind, particularly from a financial identity standpoint. The process was trying to raise venture capital because it's one of the fastest ways to get, growth. And then number two, get a good team to move our technology forward. So the fundraising process includes, going to different investors. We're turned away over 200 times, conversations after conversations. A lot of people didn't believe in our idea. But fortunately, we were able to raise a pre-seed round of over $450,000, really supported by the finest venture capitalists in Silicon Valley, to really just test out the idea. So in the venture world, pre-seed is just, let's see if this thing works. Mm-hmm. We leverage that capital, also got capital from Europe, particularly Norway, to test the hypothesis we were trying to prove out. So after that process, last year, we went through what we consider one of the most toughest periods of our lives, raising capital.
Wow.
Samia and I were in deep debt, a lot of credit card debt. We had depleted our savings. We had nothing. So we're going out there to raise capital, rejections after rejections. But after, 8 months of raising capital, we had a great impact investor in Acumen America decide to lead our round, and other amazing investors in Silicon Valley like Klein & Perkins and many more. The Global Good Fund decided to join our round, and we're able to close over $1.6 million in capital.
That is just like a overcoming the odds kind of story that I love so much. That's so great. Did you find in that experience too that you had shifted your understanding of where you were seeking capital and knew where to look in terms of impact, specifically impact investors who are trying to invest in social enterprise?
Right. So when we talk about impact, our company, we are unapologetic about the fact that we're a for-profit company. We're not a non-profit organization. We fundamentally believe we can do good and make a lot of money while doing it. A lot of companies have done that, and we're unapologetic about that reality. So that's number one. The way you look for that kind of capital is not going to look for, donors. Donor capital is good, but for what we're trying to build, it is audacious. It has never been done before, and it's a big, big dream. There's one of the American presidents once said, "America is too big for small dreams." And we have big dreams, and we want to make the world a more perfect place. So that involved going to folks that have funded the big ideas. Who are the investors that funded the Googles, the Amazons of the world, the companies that fundamentally changed the way we think about the world today? Those are the investors we went after, and those are some of the investors that took a chance on us to build what we're building today. So for us, it's not, the strategies we used was just, who are the big investors that have fundamentally changed the landscape of the world, and how can we also get capital from them? And that's what we elected to do.
That is really the fundamental understanding of that, is knowing what you said that was so powerful, being unapologetic that you can be for profit and still do good. So it's doing good as a company while also doing good for humanity. It can coexist, right? And it's kind of a misnomer that people think that that's not possible. And there are a lot of companies out there, you now naming several of them, including companies like Bain Capital, who invest in a lot of social enterprise and took that step to understand that doing social good means that it's good not just for humanity, but also can definitely be good for the bottom line of the company. And when you're taking on such an amazing first-time endeavor, that is really, it says a lot about you and your founder as a company for these impact investors to take that leap of faith on you, which is super impressive. Which leads me to my very exciting piece of information. You had something really impressive come out of this year, didn't you?
Yeah.
You want to tell everybody what that was, so I don't have to let the cat out of the bag for you?
We've had a lot of exciting news, from partnerships to the biggest credit rating agency in the world, Equifax, to, partnering with the biggest property managers in the United States and bringing on world-class people. I think one of the recognition was being recently, my co-founder and I, being named Forbes 30 under 30 for the year 2020. But one thing I always like to say about that recognition is it doesn't really, Forbes recognition is great. It shows the hard work we've put in, but there are millions of people out there doing incredible work. We're lucky to be selected and found. But the most important thing we should take away from this is the recognition is not about what we have done. It's about what the collective has done, what our team has done, the sleepless nights, the investors that decided to bet on us, the first customers we had that gave us a chance to prove out our hypothesis. The award and the recognition goes to them. We are just part of the engine that continues to shone light on the good work and the investments and the tireless efforts that these people have put in place. So, one thing I always talk about is victory has 1,000 fathers, but defeat has none. So, everyone can celebrate the Forbes 30 under 30 recognition, but we like to emphasize it is all about the collective. It is all about the people that give us a fighting chance. And those are the people we want this award, this recognition to go to and tell a more interesting story on what they're going through.
That's right. And it's also about the people that you're really trying to lift, right? I mean, and we're going to go dive deep into that in part 3. I want to know some of the tangible boots on the ground, like difference, impact you've actually made through Isusu, which I think is great. But before we wrap our part 2 of this series, you talked about your partnership with Equifax. I mean, that's pretty impressive in and of itself too. So what was that experience like for you? And I mean, Equifax, I don't think most people would associate them with wanting to do social impact work. So, maybe misinformed, not really know. Can you give us a little bit of information about what that experience was like? And maybe you guys helped enlighten them a little bit, or were they always on this track?
Certainly. So just a quick background. Equifax is the biggest credit rating agency in the world. A true American company that has a plethora of data on different people in this country, particularly credit data. Our relationship with Equifax was really about the business we do, where we capture rental data and report it into them. So the question was, how do we do this in an efficient manner, and then in a manner that has the most impact? Equifax has always been unapologetic about the fact that they want to have an impact, but it takes a collective from both sides. They have their business mandates. They need partners to make this a reality. And that's where we came in. We went in. It took 18 months to, 2 years of due diligence before the announcements came out. A lot of privacy, a lot of data security, hard due diligence. So our company had to grow up really fast to reach their level. So the partnership really gives us access to over, 250 million Americans today to be able to pull and, have their credit scores. So if you go to the App Store today and you try to you go to the App Store, the Android or the iOS store, you click on Esusu Rent, you can download the app and anyone can check their credit score for free without any ads, any predatory product. But that's a product of the partnership and the incredible work of our team members to make sure folks can get access to that important data, which can be difficult to get access to, or do the kind of impact calculation we're looking for. So, we love our friends at Equifax. They've been an incredible partner, but they've also helped us, grow up very, very fast.
That's fantastic. Well, I am so happy for you. Congratulations. I think that really shows a lot about what you guys have built for such a huge, again, institutional company to want to partner with you. That shows the extraordinary disruption of what you're bringing to that whole industry, and that it's really going to make a difference in people's lives. And they want that. Instead of trying to reinvent the wheel, they're like, let's lift you as a company too and bring you into our family so that we can do this together. And I love that so much. So Abbey, we're going to go into kind of a little bit more about in part 3 about what your company is built around, how many people work for you, what kind of actual impact you've made. And then I want to touch a little bit more about COVID-19 and just sort of what you think the future of rents and mortgages are based on your incredible bird's eye view. So before we wrap part 2, this has been so awesome. Would you please tell people where they can find you?
Absolutely. You can find us at Esusurents.com. So that's ESUSU.com. So we're on all social media platforms also. So we're looking forward to connecting with everyone there.
Terrific. And thank you everyone for tuning into part 2 with my interview of Abbey Wimmeo and Isusurents.org. And I'm super, super excited to have you come back for part 3 because it's going to be, I know, very heartwarming and really inspiring to help you find your purpose. I'm Alyssa Fisher-Harris. Thank you so much. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to A World on Purpose. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher-Harris, as you know, and I am here to bring you part 3 of our 3-part series with my amazing guest, Abbey Wimmeo, and his company called IsusuRents.com. That is a correction. I am owning up to the fact that I was calling it a .org, so thank you for enlightening me, Abbey. It's really great to always know when you're not doing something totally the best way. So it's IsusuRents.com, and Abbey is back with us. And in this part 3, we're going to dive a little deeper into kind of how the company's structured, how many people it employs, which I think is a nice thing if you want to choose to share, and the actual impact that you're going to be making on the people's lives about what you do with these platforms. And then I want to touch on COVID-19 and sort of talk about what you think the future of our rents and our mortgages are based on your experience. So first, what would you like to share with us about, first of all, the fact that your company is still afloat during this time, is still doing well, and you're still able to employ your amazing, amazing corporate family. Can you tell us about that a little bit and what you'd like the world to know about your team?
Certainly. Thank you so much for having me once again. Such a deep pleasure to be doing part 3 with you. So just a quick background. Esusu is a Delaware corporation, so a for-profit Delaware corporation. We have a non-profit arm, but our majority of our activities are run through a Delaware corporation. We're a team of now 22 people and growing. And then we believe we have, the best people, and we, from our company's perspective, and really imbibed in our core value, our people are our most important assets, and we'll do anything to protect them. So whatever we do at Isusu, it's truly of a collective, and none of what we're doing and the impacts we've had would have been possible without our incredible team. To think about the current times we're facing right now, it is absolutely unprecedented. It is nothing compared to what we've seen, most likely since the Spanish flu, and none of us were alive to witness or talk about what that time felt like. So during this unprecedented time, the question we asked ourselves is simple: what can we do, and how do we want history to remember us? When we looked at the data of over 200 tenants we have in our network, we found out that there is a risk that 65% of people won't be able to meet their rent obligations, which is absolutely dire. How can we see close to 65% of people being homeless, potentially homeless if they get evicted? So what we decided to do was create a rental relief fund, which is a zero interest loan where people will have the opportunity to pay over 18 months period. So we pay their rent and make sure their landlords don't kick them out. It's as simple as that. And when we take that approach to the landlords or our customers also, not only is the tenant happy about the work we're doing, the landlords are also elated because they also have a mortgage to pay. So it's really having empathy with the tenant and then empathy with the landlord, because proximity just changes the way we look at things. We're not here to lay blame on saying, hey, landlord, don't kick anyone out because you have all the money in the world. We just understand the regression of, look, the landlords also needs to pay a mortgage. And yes, a lot of the tenants are either let go or followed. How can we thread the needle and bridge the divide and continue to have a prosperous society? Hence why we created a rent relief fund that has raised our initial goal was to raise $25,000. And today we've raised over $180,000, 7 times our goal, and we're still raising capital. So if you want to support that, you can go to isusurrentrelief.com and chip in so people stay in their homes.
That's great. And we'll definitely remind everyone at the end of this episode how they can do that, how they can support that. And also we'll do another call to action for landlords and the other people that you'd like to kind of get on board with your platform. I want to dive a little deeper too into what is happening. And if you think, in your opinion, in communities where rent has been exorbitantly high already, like I live in Los Angeles, or San Francisco or New York. Or even just around the country in general, do you think that the coronavirus and what's been happening is going to bring rents back down to a more affordable pot? Like, are companies, are banks going to refinance for landlords, which means that they can have lower payments, which means the renters have lower payments? Or what is your opinion about what you think the aftermath of this will look like? I think we'd all love to know what your thoughts are on that.
It's a great question, but I'll take it a step further. We can think about the future without understanding the context of the past. Mm-hmm. One of the biggest crises we've had in the United States is housing shortage, particularly, and very well researched and underscored, is affordable housing shortage. That's the reason why we have one of the biggest homelessness crises in the world today. Mm-hmm. COVID-19 has essentially exploded that, crisis and multiplied the kind of, disaster that it's looming. So the question about what is going to happen with the future of rent, prices, or are we going to have government step in, or what does the future of mortgages look like, is really dependent on how we've built our structure today as a society. We've built a structure whereby we've left a lot of, African Americans, Hispanic, and other people of color behind. And we've built a system whereby, if you're renting, there's not an opportunity to build equity outside of the work companies like ours are doing to make sure you get credit for it. And then we've also built a system whereby we fundamentally, in all honesty, right, marginalized and left a lot of people behind. So in that sense, we built a mansion on a sinking sand. The question is, we have an opportunity to right that wrong moving forward. How do we take out the sinking sand and lay a solid foundation so we can have something that stands and realize the full potential of the United States of America? And here's the path. From my perspective, it's really threefold. Number one, it's looking at what the construct of how we think about rents today and the kind of credits we need to give to people. Mm-hmm. There's two things involved in that. The first thing is, when people pay rent, can they get credits for paying rent? Are they cashback alternative that the government can fund? Can we have a housing stability loan whereby we're going to refuse and agree as a society that regardless of where you come from, and really embrace the power of housing as a fundamental human right? That's going to take a lot of capital, but we've seen it done before by Franklin Delano Roosevelt with all the audacious plan he did with the Great Deal. So this is not a fallacious idea. It's a big, grand idea, but it's really practical. Give people credit for their rent in rewards and a whole bunch of credits. And number two, if people are about to fall behind, treat them as human beings and see shelter as a fundamental human right. And give them, let's invest in big housing stability programs. It can be cheap or zero interest loans. That's the first part. Number two, when we talk about mortgage, historically in the United States, we've had a lot of things with redlining, where we purposely left particularly African Americans behind. And when we think about the future, what we need to do is just, how do we right that wrong, given the current constructs we have today? So more loans without disenfranchising people with the kind of credit score they have or their financial identity, right? Giving people access to capital in good locations so they can buy property, because housing is still the biggest driver of wealth in the United States. Simple, point blank period. So we need to give people an opportunity to participate to make that happen. And my point three is dependent on that. People want to buy properties, people want to get access to home ownership, but you need two things to make it happen. You need a good credit identity. So we need to call on HUD, who has been very receptive to the work we're doing. We actually published, the housing department cited Esusu, the only for-profit entity in a recent report they just published, talking about how we can move and the needle on credit identity by just reporting rent. We need to make it a national program. We need to make it mandatory in our laws and follow the footsteps of places like Washington, D.C., New York, Massachusetts, and California has something on the house floor right now. And make sure when you pay your rent, you get credit for it. And companies like us and others will step in and make sure we fill that void. So when we do that, we're going to see an average credit score go up, right? And people can get access to homes. They can go to a bank. Because I don't believe the banker down the street is racist. No. The banker down the street just wants a return on his or her capital.
Mm-hmm.
That's the fundamental construct. So we need to empower people by boosting their financial identity. So when they go to the bank, they're not turned away just like my mother and I were turned away when we came to this country.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to level the playing field, give people a fighting chance, and reimagine what this prosperous America can look like. One where we don't build it on a sinking sand, but one where we build it on a solid foundation. That is our perspective, but we cannot fix what we can measure. And we need to go back, reflect on the history, bring us up to speed and look at it from a justice lens. And if we do the three things I've outlined, which is really simple, data, more access to capital, right, and broad-based policy and regulation, there's no limits to where the potential of these United States can go.
I think that is so powerful, and I really appreciate that you brought up too that it really starts with the lack of affordable housing, because I live in Los Angeles and we have 60,000 homeless people here, and I do a lot. I think you remember my story. I grew up homeless on and off as a kid for 13 years myself. And, my father, it was hard to get a credit score even for my dad back in the 70s, and trying to be able to buy a house was unfathomable because we didn't even have a home, and so I work with these people every day going out doing homeless advocacy work. And it's challenging because they don't even have an address, and, not even having an address, let alone a bank account, let alone knowing how to get that credit score. And so I love what you said about the three fundamental things that we need to do. Here we're trying to solve some of the problems by, our city government has tried to get hotels to where we can start to place people and then have a solution instead of just a Band-Aid temporarily housing them for COVID. What's the next step? How do we get them actually into an affordable place to live? So when you talked about those three things and governments getting involved, is Isusu going to have the ability to be that platform? Are you looking to do that, partner with governments and cities? And how does that work so that people who are listening or involved in politics can get you involved?
It's a great question. I studied development finance in graduate school, and I'm a big believer in the power of government and what governments can do. Right? Government has the ability to set the environment, and then private players can come and realize the potential in that particular sandbox. So to your question, we need regulations, we need policies that can right the wrong of what we've had in the past, right? So in this case, we're already working with government. So we're not we've put ourselves out there, albeit a small company, to go out there. We're talking to the Consumer Financial Protection Bureaus, speaking with them every time on how we can advocate on behalf of the consumer. So we're not waiting to get, slapped on the wrist and saying, hey, you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing for the consumer. We're going to them and saying, these are some risks, and let's work together to tackle them. Mm-hmm. Like I said earlier, HUD, the Housing Department of the United States, published a report about the power of rent reporting. Esusu was the only private entity listed in that report as one of the most efficient way to capture rental data and report it into the credit bureau. Not only the most efficient, but also one of the most affordable way. Number 3, right, we're working with states and local governments on how to make this any government property. We should be able to capture rental data and report it into the credit rating agencies to boost credit scores. A lot of good work that includes us or does not even include us in places like Washington, D.C., mm-hmm. right? In places like Washington State, in Oregon, in Massachusetts, even in California, where you're situated, audacious plans to say any public housing, we should be able to capture that rental data and report positive data on people living in public housing, because that's how we lift people from rent control to home ownership. And the more people we have cycled out, is more wealth for the American society. And then more people can get access to those homes. We don't want people living in affordable housing for decades. That's not the intent. The intent is an interim solution so you get support and you're propelled. We can't have a society where we leave people in affordable housing. We should be thinking about prosperous housing, prosperous home ownership as the biggest driver of wealth. And then we should focus on the people with fundamentally left behind. And unapologetically, that's African Americans, number one. And number two, Hispanic folks and other people of color. We need to right the wrong of what this country has done in the past. But I'm fundamentally hopeful in what we can do as a people, as Americans, and really, above all, pave that permanent bridge to financial access and inclusion to everyone. Because it's not only good for us as a society, it's good for the soul of these United States.
That's absolutely right. I think you need to run for president of the United States, if you ask me. You'd be a fantastic president. So I just want to touch on before we wrap. Thank you so much for sharing all that, because it's fundamentally educational for people too who don't know these things and who might not even know where to start. Abbey, I think it's just amazing. You've opened up this entire landscape for people who probably felt like that was never a dream that they could realize. And so I love it. I love that you guys are doing this, because it's really giving an opportunity to people who wouldn't have it. I certainly wouldn't have had it when I was growing up. My father wouldn't have. And so I really appreciate that. I'd like to touch quickly on the actual impact that you guys have made and how many lives you've touched with Isusu, and what kind of examples that you've been able to do in terms of lifting people out of these situations where they've maybe been able to buy their first house for the first time.
Absolutely. So I'll start on a macro level. It's a great question. So we have a universe of over 200,000 tenants today in 23 states in the United States. We report data on over 35,000 of them. And some of the stories we've heard are incredible. The first story that really touched my heart is someone that came to this country, just like the story of my mother and I, had no credit score at all, was trying to get access to a credit card, but fortunately was working and was living in one of the buildings. We work with their landlords to capture rental data, and we were able to report 2 years of back data, so 24 months of on-time rent for this individual, and their credit score started in America at a 670, which is considered a good credit score, right? To give you an idea, if you want to get a mortgage, you need to have a minimum of 620 to get a mortgage. But someone starting off at 670, and then they wrote us a beautiful note about how they got their first secure credit card. That might seem as nothing to the everyday American, but it's everything to an immigrant that had no way of making that happen. What that means is that person can get their first apartment. They can possibly get now, if they work hard and play, by the rules, they can get a home in the United States, one of the biggest drivers of wealth, right? We've heard another story that really touched my heart also on, a single mother of two in New York that we started reporting data on that was trying to buy her first home. She worked at the postal office for close to 20 years. One of the biggest barriers was just having a poor credit score. When we were able to report 2 years of back rents, because we're able to do it with this fascinating legislation, and yes, government works. If we work with the folks in power to make it happen, this person was able to boost their credit score to a 730, and then they had a down payment they had saved for over 7 years, and then they got a good mortgage, a 30-year mortgage at less than 3%.
Oh, wow.
It's these stories you can't make up, and they got their first home buyer credit to be able to be in a home. It's incredible. The impact we're seeing across the board just brings a lot of joy to our hearts as a company, but it takes a lot of hard work, perseverance, and grit for us to make it happen. A lot of people said this is impossible. A lot of people told us that, the work we're doing, people won't take it serious. They won't even use the scoring models we have for underwriting mortgages. But mortgage underwriters, they're changing their models from the old ones and reflecting the new ones that essentially capture this rental information. And the story of being able to, get that person their first credit score when they get that credit card. Or number two, their first home, albeit at a later age. That's what the American dream is all about. That is what we as a society should be thinking about. And that's what we're excited to do and putting ourselves in every day. That's what we wake up every morning to do, to really give people a fighting chance. And that's why we started this, to really leverage data to make good decisions. So it's been very exciting, and there's still more to come. And like we say at Isusu, the best is still unfolding.
Oh, it's so impressive. By the way, your face absolutely lights up when you tell those stories. And to me, that is the soul, right, of what you're doing. And that's why those of us in Impact do what we do. So you can really touch the lives of these people who might never have a fighting chance. And I want to cry because it's just so beautiful. And I love watching you tell those stories. So it's just lovely to see your face light up. Impressive that you can actually go back and get back data on people's rents to fast forward them into prosperity is just extraordinary. So thank you for sharing those impact stories, because I think people, when they hear that, they're like, oh my gosh, that could be me, which is just what we want people to hear, right? So as a closing, I'm just so impressed with you, Abbey. I was from the moment I met you, and just hearing this whole story of yours and this journey unfold. And what you're doing is it's monumental to the human right. Like you said, it is a fundamental human right to have a home and a safe place to live, and food, and, those basic things that are taken for granted. So thank you for what you're doing for Americans that might not have that fighting chance. I really thank you, having been one of those myself. It means a lot to me too, and all the work that I do in that space. I want to close by letting people know how they can support you, both with the COVID relief fund, and then also how do both landlords, they know your website, but just let people know what it is you're looking for to make this a much bigger movement. Do you need landlords to contact you? Do you need certain kinds of businesses to contact you? How can people help you?
Thank you. So the three asks on our end. Number one, folks should go to isusurentrelief.com. If you're a renter and you can afford rent, click apply. We're going to do everything we can to get you capital, provided you meet the requirements. And number two, if you're a donor, you can invest, click donate, the same button, isusurent.com, and chip in so someone can have a roof over their head. If you're a landlord, number two, if you're a landlord and you want to really report rental data, you should go to isusurents.com. There's a form there. It's going to take you less than 30 seconds. Reach out to us and let's get working with your tenant. It improves your bottom line. It makes you have happy tenants and also gives you good security for your income. And number three is we just want more people involved. Go to our website, chip in, give us feedback. And then if you're a foundation that is really interested about disrupting the way we think about housing in America today and contributing towards a bigger fund, the audacious housing stability loans, reach out to us. Well, we want to do it big. We want to make sure people are not evicted. We want to give them good housing stability loans because we believe that housing is a fundamental human right. To help us make that happen, go donate at isusurentrelief.com. Reach out to us and let's change the way we think about shelter.
I just want to hug you. I'm hugging you from the other side of the country. Thank you so much, Abbey, for your time. It's an honor, really, to share this story with my audience, and with hopefully the world will eventually know about you. It would be nice to know if other global economies could take on this same strategy, which I'm sure is probably part of your thoughts. So thank you for your time, and thank you for what you're doing for humanity. It's truly inspiring.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and let's keep fighting. Let's keep doing the good work, and the best is still unfolding.
I agree. All right. Well, that's our series with Abbey Wimmeo and Isusurents.com. I am your host, Alyssa Fisher Harris of A World on Purpose. And thank you so much for tuning in and just hearing these stories of these amazing change makers who are really living their life with purpose, for purpose, and on purpose. And it's an honor to bring you this content. And it's an honor for me to get to just be in the same space with these amazing human beings like Abbey here. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you for taking this journey into a world on purpose with our incredible guests. To learn more about our amazing guests and their inspiring purpose-driven work, please go to aworldonpurpose.com. Don't forget to look at our call to action of the week to mobilize your desire for purpose into action. A World on Purpose can be found on Apple Podcasts and all the major podcast platforms, and the video version can be found on YouTube. If what you heard today inspires you, please write a review and like and share on the platform of your choice. We'd love to also hear from you and learn your pivot to purpose and the meaningful work that you do that lifts humanity. Send your stories to info@aworldonpurpose.com. I'd like to thank our World on Purpose team for making this show a reality. Once again, I'm your host, Alyssa Fisher Harris. Thank you for tuning into A World on Purpose. I look forward to seeing you soon.